Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Food Processing Skills Canada's second webinar in our new Speaking Food webinar series. And I would also like to recognize that the month of October is National Disability Employment Awareness. My name is Tracy Bernacki-Duza, and I am the Senior Project Manager at FPSC. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to the behind-the-scenes FPSC team. Marwan Dole is our web host and process manager at FPSC and is coordinating the Speaking Food webinar series. Marwan's going to cover some webinar housekeeping, and then I will introduce our speaker for today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Tracy. Um, Thank you all for joining us today. And I would just like to go through some quick notes here for our session. So our session will be recorded today, and the reason being is that we record the session so that we can share it with any of the participants that have signed up. So you will all be receiving a link with the recording of this session today for your future reference and your use. We will also be sharing the slides from the sessions today and any follow-up action items that could come up just for your reference, and you'll be receiving that via email. And for our session today, we will have the wonderful Jason taking us through some of the major topics. And then after that, we'll be following up with a quick question and answer session. Now, we do have some more time today, thanks to Jason, for us to go a bit over time for the schedule time that we have, so that we can cover any more questions that come up. So please feel free to stay in and ask any questions that you would like. This will be a question and answer entry that you could use through Zoom to place your questions, and you can also comment and upvote on these topics as the questions are coming in. As a final note here as well, as Tracy previously mentioned, I'm also the web host today, so I can assist with any technical assistance that you might need or any inquiries that you might have. So I will be pasting my email in the chat below, so please feel free to use it and reach out to me throughout the call today, and I'll be sure to target those inquiries. Thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, I'll leave it over to Jason. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marwan. So Jason J. McBride is a dedicated advocate for inclusive workplaces, specializing in neurodivergent workforce development. With experience as a diversity and inclusion professional for Food Processing Skills Canada and a national partnership specialist for the FIRST FIRST program, Jason has worked in 10 countries, driving meaningful change in workplace practices around the globe. He believes in going beyond just meeting diversity quotas to ensure everyone has a voice and the opportunity to showcase their unique talents. As a keynote speaker, Jason engages audiences with humor and personal stories, making complex topics relatable. His passion for food and the community has influenced his professional journey, allowing him to connect deeply with diverse audiences through shared experiences. Please welcome Jason J. McBride.
Thank you, Tracy and Marwan. It's great to be here on National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and also for the first week of launch of Foodability, which of course we're going to get into in a little bit later. Where I'm coming from, I guess, and as Tracy mentioned, my background is over 30 years in the hospitality industry, as well as in teaching post-secondary, and I also work as the National Partnership Specialist for the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and work for the Fostering. To put that into perspective, I get the opportunity to talk with government at all levels, from federal to provincial to industry, in so many different ways. And it's a wonderful opportunity to share conversations about disability inclusion, about workforce development. And today I'm going to do a short presentation about how disability inclusion is very much the solution to workforce development in many ways. Sure, there we go. I think I got it right, Marwan.
You're good to go, Jason.
Okay. So Before I kind of dive into the meat of this presentation, I mean, it begs to define what disability is and also what sustainable workforce development truly is. So disability in my world, in the conversations that I have on a daily basis, is a very, very broad brush. So it can be maybe an individual has dyslexia or a learning difference, or they have neurodiversity, or perhaps they have had a car accident, or they've gone through cancer, or it's something that is that's creating a barrier and allowing them to move forward, or even enter into employment. So in that perspective, we're going to move forward into what is sustainable, what is a sustainable workforce, and how can disability really build on that. So sustainable, as soon as you say sustainable, everybody thinks it has to be something to do with green and the environment, and that's not where we're going today. So the presentation is creating sustainable workforces through disability inclusion, and I'll give my short but long definition of sustainable workforce development. So please bear with me for a second. So sustainable workforce development is the strategic process of cultivating a resilient and adaptive workforce by prioritizing the recruitment and retention of local individuals who are educated, ready to engage in meaningful employment, and including those with disabilities. This approach emphasizes the creation of long-term employment opportunities that support both economic stability and inclusive growth within the community, ensuring that the workforce not only meets current demands, but is also equipped to adapt to future changes. So yes, that's, yeah, I get it. It's a mouthful. But without including folks with disabilities within our community. So, and it's a great opportunity to work with folks who are local and educated, as the definition states. There's so much untapped talent within Canada, within all industries, that we could be filling the jobs where we are having lots and lots of conversations about labor shortages. So it could be in manufacturing, it could be in the trades, it could be in hospitality. And these are places where we're always having conversations about labor shortages, and we've tried to solve those with many different ways, through immigration, through education, through all of these different things. But where we're not putting a massive focus, especially in Canada, we're having these conversations, but we're missing out. So we have a lot of untapped talent. And there's a few quotes in here from Ryan Jenkins, who I've become a fan of. And the first one is, "This is how we've always done it" mindset is a slippery slope to irrelevance. And that couldn't be more true. On a global perspective, over 1 billion people have a disability. Now, you think, well, over 1 billion people, that's a lot. Those are only the people who have said they have a disability. So that leaves us with kind of a skewed number. So let's bring it a little closer to home. So Canadian perspective. So in Canada, 27% of working age Canadians identify as having at least one barrier caused by a disability. That's more than 1 in 4. 1 in 4. So if 25% of the population, and this is working age population, has a challenge through disability that could very well, and in many cases, be supported through an accommodation or productivity support, these are folks who are educated, ready, willing, and local, available to fill positions. A bit of a deeper perspective when we talk about educated. So this is a 2021 Stats Canada census. Of the 980,090 adults with disabilities in Canada who were surveyed, 62% had some post-secondary non-university education. 38% report some post-secondary university education. So there's a proportionate amount of folks who self-identify as having a disability who also have post-secondary education. That means that we have an educated workforce that is ready and wanting to go to work and are unfortunately very unemployed in many cases. So why aren't we working with these people, and why are we not having ongoing conversations all the time at the water cooler? Why is this not an ongoing conversation about disability almost every day? So we've heard the term neurodivergent. I mean, we understand, why we need, ramps and grab bars. In colleges, there's lots of supports in colleges, lots of supports for people in K-12 schools. This is an opportunity for us to educate ourselves in industry to be able to know how to support folks with disabilities and bring them into meaningful positions. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's even on my LinkedIn page. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. My dear friend and colleague, who is my rock, who I work with every day, Carrie Deere. This is the disability inclusion isn't just about ramps and grab bars. She says all the time when we're doing presentations together across the country. And it really kind of hits home, because there are conversations that we have with people where, they just don't understand what disability truly means. And when we're talking about the challenges of people with disabilities getting into the workforce, I mean, there are comments sometimes where maybe the conversation is, we can't have somebody on a wheelchair, in a wheelchair on a ladder. And I mean, it kind of sounds silly, but I mean, somebody actually said it. But here's where we want to get to today. So according to Harvard Business Review, employers often lack awareness of the needs of people with invisible disabilities and are often ill-prepared to provide necessary supports like accommodations or productivity needs. So when we talk about accommodations and productivity needs, they're not necessarily the same thing. And now I've used this joke too many times. It's become my dad joke. But accommodations, most people think that it is something that comes with a really crappy continental breakfast. And it's not the same as a productivity need. So accommodation in the workplace is when somebody self-discloses that they have a disability and they need to be accommodated for that disability. Maybe it's a little more time to get to work. Maybe it's a different kind of schedule. Maybe it's working in a more quiet space. Perhaps it's remote working, et cetera, et cetera. A productivity need is much more, perhaps you need an ergonomic tool, or perhaps you need some kind of product or, like I said, tool to help you do the job better. So these aren't the same thing, but the result and the intent is the same. So there's lots of advantages of bringing on folks with disabilities into your workforce. And another Ryan Jenkins quote is, "The future of work is human connection." The future of work truly is human connection. We talk about automating, and we talk about will the robots take over and take our jobs, and production, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things that automation can do, but a few the important things that they can't do is improve productivity amongst the existing workers, improve morale, also to support community, and also to support people who, again, are ready, willing, and educated to come and work. So 30% of businesses who have been surveyed report improvements in productivity by bringing on folks with disabilities and supporting them. So that's the 30%. You can't buy that kind of improvement. You can't. That bringing folks on and supporting them appropriately. And again, remember, this is 1 in 4, so we're talking 27% of Canadians. You can't buy that kind of culture within your organization. So, and again, when they're talking about 30% of improvements, I mean, you talk about bottom line, and we talk about, the economy that we're in, and we talk about the workforce in its current state. What a boon to be able to increase your productivity by 30%. Also, when businesses bring on folks with disabilities and support them appropriately, the retention rates go through the roof. Now, $2,500 is really the base of bringing somebody on from HR. So bringing them on, training them, putting them through their first, few weeks of what it costs you to get somebody into your organization. And this isn't just folks with disabilities. This is in general. Retention rates are key. If you have low retention rates, you have a better culture. Another conversation that is very rarely had is workplace accidents and insurance claims. So oftentimes I have the opportunity to speak with employers and union halls and whatnot. And it really truly is the case that lower workplace accidents and insurance claims, the average reduction of 12%, according to the Canadian Insurance Bureau, by having folks on your staff who come on with a disability and self-disclose. Now, why is that, you say? Well, I mean, the generalized answer for that is we live in such a society where the stigma around disability is I guess the first go-to of folks who are uneducated about disability. So stigma does a lot of things, and the biggest thing that it does is it removes opportunity from people who truly could be advancing within their job and also having gainful employment. So people tend to be more careful, and they tend to take their time a little more when they get an opportunity to go into a meaningful position. So this does, again, lots of things. I mean, it increases morale, increases productivity, increases retention rates, and reduces insurance. I mean, there's a justification unto itself right there. Now, the challenges to employment and retention. Over 1/3 of employed Canadians with disabilities reported unmet accommodation needs, according to Stats Canada in 2022. So it's not necessarily, in my experience, that organizations parameters of accommodating, and what are these are freezing up there.
Sorry, Jason, you cut out there for a second. If you don't mind repeating that point.
Sure. How far to go back do I need to go?
And just I think to the start of the slide here.
Oh, sure, no problem. So again, 1/3 of employed Canadians with disabilities report unmet accommodation needs. So, I mean, the gist of this comment really is that the reasons why, in most cases, and in my experience in speaking with, everybody from educators to union halls to employers, is that people don't know how to accommodate, and they don't know where to begin. And I think a lot of this comes from us as a society not really being comfortable with having conversations around disabilities. I mean, it's one thing for, to come on and do a presentation about disabilities with all kinds of stats and stuff like that, but it's a different conversation to be having a conversation about disabilities with somebody with a disability. So, and I akin it to how we talk about death in society. So it's always well-meaning. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. We don't really know what to say. And we always mean well. What we're not doing in many cases is creating a culture of conversation around disability where it's commonplace. And again, where if 1 in 4 people, and you can walk down the street, 1 in 4 people with a disability. I'm neurodivergent. And I always say that when I go into a room, when I'm having a conversation with a group. And for a while, I didn't do it because I thought that, people would think differently of me, or there would be a stigma, or the conversation would end, or they wouldn't take me seriously. I found the opposite was true. So, and in the last 6 months, I've had 3 people come up to me, all of whom are very highly regarded within their profession. They're high level managers within their organizations, and they've come and they've said, "Thank you for breaking the ice, and thank you for talking about disability in your own lived experience." And these people have gone and gotten tested for ADHD and for other things. And they came back and they said, "You know what, you've changed the way that I work. You changed my life." And if this has come from having conversations where, it really kind of warms up the room when people go, "Oh, me too." So to be able to have disability inclusion as part of sustainable workforce, we have to make it welcoming. Before I go into this slide, I'm going to go on to a little bit more about making it welcoming, because again, like I said about stigma, I mean, there are 80% of employees with invisible disabilities choose not to disclose their condition. And the reason, again, is stigma. So what happens is people go through their entire day masking, trying to hide a disability. Perhaps they have to go to the washroom too many times. Perhaps they're going through and just pushing through a workplace injury or a car accident injury, or even perhaps a disease as cancer, where they don't feel that it's safe to be able to disclose and have conversations. So I have a saying that I've used for a long, long time, and it's called "Be the lighthouse, not the tugboat." And when we're talking about be the lighthouse, not the tugboat, that starts from the top of an organization to be able to have conversations and make it commonplace to talk about what accommodations do we have when we're designing workplaces, and when we're designing positions, and when we're posting positions. Are they accessible? And are we having conversations about accessibility in order to, can we get somebody to come in and do this job? There's so many different jobs that are available for folks with, in many, many cases, it's a very, very low cost or low effort accommodation or productivity support. So effective onboarding and retention techniques begin with proactive communication. Communication around disability and workforce has to be clear. We have to understand what are the requirements, what are the expectations of folks, and are there opportunities to advance? Even when we're talking about interviews, sometimes you just have to give somebody a little bit longer, or perhaps it's not the end of the world if they request a remote interview. Community linkages. And when we're onboarding, there are so many disability employment agencies in almost every community across this nation where I have the opportunity to speak with them. And they have folks who are, again, ready, willing, and educated. If you are running an organization and you are looking for people, that's the place to go. CCRW is one of them. And we have a new website called Untapped Talent. And it is an opportunity for organizations to go and talk to consultants at CCRW and bring folks into the workforce. So having a relationship with people within the disability community helps in a big, big way. I'm not going to go through these all, but one of the key things I would say is accessibility audits. So within your organization, how accessible is the organization, right? So as I always, or as I said and jokingly, as Carrie says, it's not just about ramps and grab bars. Are you getting feedback from the people who you work with? Is there a open communication back and forth? So a really great saying I heard just recently was, not about us, without us. I think I got that right. But making decisions about hiring and training and retaining folks with disability without asking people with disabilities as to whether or not this works and getting the feedback is kind of missing the point, because nobody's going to know better how that feels or how that works or how that functions than somebody who you're going to bring on who's perhaps neurodivergent or perhaps in a chair, or perhaps has anxiety, and maybe they need an alteration of lighting within the room or noises nearby, or maybe they need a sit-stand desk. Maybe they need a prep table, for example, in a restaurant kitchen that is low enough that they can do prep from a wheelchair. There's so many opportunities to make this work. And again, it needs to be a commonplace conversation as we go. We need to be having these conversations about how are we going to accommodate folks and bringing them into our organizations. I talk fast and perhaps maybe too fast. I've gotten to the final tips and takeaways, but the gist of the presentation here, and we'll do Q&As, is there's opportunity to employ a quarter of the workforce in this country. There are supports available. You can find them through employment organizations across the country. You can find them through the federal government. You can find them through the provincial government. And accommodations are not expensive on average. So most supports cost less than $500. If they're bigger than that, there are grants available. There are subsidies available. There are supports available. It is the onus of the employer, if they're going to bring somebody on, that they accommodate up into what we call undue hardship. Well, at an average support cost of $500, that's not necessarily undue hardship. So disability inclusive recruitment creates sustainable workforces. Canada is not facing a labor shortage. We're facing a disability employment inclusion deficit. And I say that again, because we should be having conversations about how can we make our organization, our workplace, our factory, our job site more inclusive so that we can improve our retention, so that we can improve our morale, so that we can improve our productivity, so that we can bring our insurance down. It's not a difficult conversation to have. We just need to be open to having it. And as I mentioned earlier, people with disabilities are probably already working for you in some capacity. When we give the number of 27%, I mean, those are people who have just disclosed. We have conversations with folks with disabilities coming on for support programs, like the first program from CCRW. And 80% is probably a conservative number of people who come to the program and don't readily want to disclose that they have a disability. And again, it comes down to stigma. So when I talk with union halls and employers, that conversation, usually the response is it's probably believed to be higher than that. So again, when we talk about 1 in 4, perhaps it's actually a higher number because of so many folks who aren't coming forward and disclosing. The key to workplace sustainability in Canada isn't just going back and doing the same thing we've always done, or bringing more people into Canada to fill positions where people are waiting to work. We have so many supports available. We have so many people in the community who are wanting to support. And many organizations, when we have conversations with them, want to be an employer of choice. The benefit of being an employer of choice and for the community to know that you're an employer of choice is huge. So I'll give a couple of examples. So the biggest example is that I can think of is a restaurant in Calgary, and it's called Pete's Drive-In. Pete's Drive-In is so busy that you have to park down the street, and this street is actually Highway 1, so 16th Ave. You have to go and get in line And it's a better part of an hour to go and get your hamburger, fries, or ice cream. And every person who works within that organization has some manner of disability. In some cases, it's Down syndrome. In some cases, it's learning differences. In some cases, it's intellectual challenges. But everybody in the city knows that this organization supports people with disabilities, and they support it en masse. It's been around for decades and decades. I know it's been around for at least 30 years, and it's a testament to really the benefits of supporting folks with disabilities, bringing them into your employment, and also letting the community know you're doing such a thing. Because people want to support organizations who are supporting others within the community. And I want to leave on one note, and I know I spoke a little fast. It's maybe my neurodivergent, a little bit nervous. If you have met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. And that quote comes from my good friend Pete Bennett from Distinctability, and he's also on our Foodability team. And that really, the first time I heard it, struck a chord. When we're talking about, maybe somebody knows somebody, or somebody has worked with somebody who has ADHD or a particular disease or a particular challenge. Every single person is different, and disability is really nothing but a difference. It's not something to be segregated. It's something to be celebrated and talked about. And how can we find the strength within these individuals to fill positions that we want them to work at within our organization? How can we welcome them into a safe space? And on that note, Marwan, I see you're ready and waiting. Thank you for joining me today. I know that went a little quicker than I kind of wanted it to do, but as I said, a little nervous and spoke a little fast.
No, I think you did great, Jason. Thank you so much for your time here and for covering these topics. I see that we have a couple of questions in, but before we do get into that, I just want to take a quick second here to introduce everyone on the call today into our Foodability program. Jason mentioned that a bit here on our call, so I'm just going to take a quick second to review the program with you guys and let you guys know about what we're starting here. So I'm just going to take over the share screen here, Jason.
Yep, great, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So the Foodability program is a new initiative that FPSC is carrying out here. And for us to start out about the program, I just want us to think about a quick point here. So what do we think when we hear about the word disability? Jason kind of described this and went into a lot of the details here, but it's split up into physical, developmental, neurodiverse, or episodic, and it's quite a spectrum where everything falls in between. So I just want to mention that this term covers 300 conditions and over that, actually, where 1 in 3 Canadians identify as having a disability, and more than 800,000 people with disabilities have the potential to find meaningful employment, but are not employed, just like Jason mentioned. So this is where our program here comes in, and we're hoping that employers can lead the way in order to build this awareness and understand how we can actually benefit our own businesses and our industry through this, through better hiring practices and disability awareness. So for the program here, the Foodability program is a 3-year program to be delivered in French and English, and it will launch for Canada's 13,000 plus industry participants in the food and beverage manufacturing industry. So the aim, as mentioned, is to raise the awareness and implement the best practices that we can use for recruitment, hiring, and the retention of people with disabilities. So we would like to introduce the incredible variety of jobs and career pathways available to people with disabilities and for employers to actually capitalize on as well. So as part of the Foodability program, we're actually doing a national Foodability tour across 2024. So what this is we're making specific workshops nationally across Canada. And these are the dates listed here. Now, the key point is that this is available for you to sign up today. And for the workshops, there is a limited number of seats, but there is no cost allotted for you at all to attend. So The dates are listed here on the slide, and we will be sharing this back to you with more information as how you can access it once the session is over. However, we'll be going across Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, St. John's, Halifax, and Waterloo. So we would really like to see you guys in the upcoming workshops and hope that you guys can attend and join us. So sign up whenever you can once we send out the details there. Following up, now, who should attend is we're looking for business owners, decision makers, management, individuals who manage teams, and human resources professionals and practitioners. And what's included here is your meals and paid parking. You'll also get some resources such as the workbook and different tools that we offer for the program. There's also for professional certificate and digital badge associated with some of the courses that we offer as part of the program here. And there's a workshop value of almost $1,200 per person that you can utilize and leverage here. Now, following up on that, there's also the inclusivity meter survey. So this is another way that we want to get all of your input and feedback. And this is something that we will also share back with you and hope that you guys can share publicly, because we want to hear from you and we want to hear from the industry. Now, this is done in order to better shape the future of disability inclusion and really understand what the framework is and what the playing field is for disability inclusion. So this is a short survey that you can take, and by contributing, you're playing a key part in creating valuable educational resources and tools to better promote disability and inclusion. So thank you so much for your time here. That pretty much covers our Equitability program. So we will be following up with all these insights and all of the links for you guys to access for the workshop registrations, as well as an inclusivity survey. So please keep posted for that. And yeah, thank you so much for your time here. If there are any questions on this at all, please feel free to place those in the chat and we can follow up after the session with any inquiries that you might have and have some answers prepared for you, hopefully. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd like to have us get back into the Q&A here. So we do have
Marwan, can I interject just for 1 second?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Just before we get a bunch of angry letters from Maritimers, just to be clear, it's St. John, New Brunswick, not St. John's.
My apologies.
No,
I think I
no.
misread that. It
Wait,
says
I just saved us a deluge of angry, angry commentary from
My
Maritimers.
apologies there. Thank you, Jason. Okay, so are we good to start with the Q&A, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I can read out some of the questions here for you, and we'll just go through them. So we have a question that came in. This is an anonymous question. It's saying, I saw yesterday that FPSC has a new program out for people with disability and employers. Are the things you mentioned, like an audit, going to be a part of this program?
Absolutely. Yep. There is a inclusivity meter as part of the program, and for employers who participate in the program at different levels and not just on the workshop level. There is an opportunity to go through a pretty lengthy questionnaire about what are your, it really kind of dives deep into, what are your understandings, and do you know where to find the answers to the questions of things you don't understand. So, and to answer that, many conversations with folks, again, like I said in the presentation, they don't know where to find information to support their organization. And we're working to provide it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you for that. And again, we will be sending out that link for that survey. So that's a tool that you guys are going to have in your hands right off the bat. Okay, so another question that came in, what are some of the most widely known disabilities? And could you give some positive attributes or skills that we could look for to talk about when we interview someone?
Well, I do get this question often, even more specifically about trades. What are the most common disabilities that you run into? I would say mental health is the highest. So, and not because it's not because more people are suffering from mental health, as more people are having the opportunity to talk about it. And I had the absolute privilege of being at the Canadian Building Trades Union conference this year in Gatineau, Quebec, and I sat through a phenomenal presentation by a couple of gentlemen who work within the mental health supports for the trades in the province of Ontario, and there wasn't a dry eye in that room. I'm 100 people in the room, and the conversation very much is one in two by the age of 50 will have a mental health challenge in Canada. So that could be depression, it could be caused by something else. I think the opportunity for employers is to be open to have a conversation, to be compassionate about the answers that you're going to get, and to be there to support. There's no one answer. I mean, I'm not a doctor, unless you count which doctor, which is a joke. But there are supports that are available, and I think creating a safe space for somebody to psychologically, feel that they can come and disclose and ask for supports. I mean, there are so many supports that can help somebody who are suffering with mental health challenges through the day. In many cases, it's just having somebody to, as your buddy, your work buddy, who's there to be with you. And I've said this for the last year and a half. I mean, my person, my rock is Carrie Deer, and if I'm having a challenge with my own disability, she's the first person I call, and having somebody within the organization to help to support, amazing. And the other person, I mean, I have to mention Deanna Zenger, who for me, it never, ever, ever lets me not bring my true self to a conversation, to a presentation, to something I've written. Never, never, never. And she holds me to that account, and I love her for it. And she's a person who's the best kind of cheerleader you can have when she's on your team. And thank you for that, Deanna.
That's awesome, Jason. Thank you. And yeah, I can attest to that. Deanna is amazing. So it's always really important to be able to feel comfortable. So just to segue on that, are there any maybe just quick tools or tips that you can give to interviewers that are conducting the interview? Because as you know, people might be getting people coming in, and there could be simple steps or maybe some things that they could do to be maybe a bit more aware or more understanding of certain differences or neurodivergence.
For many people, interviewing is akin to public speaking, and there's the old adage. Most people would rather die than get up in front of a group of people and have a conversation. Well, in many cases, interviewing is the same way, because there's so much on the line, right? I mean, this is somebody's livelihood, it's their reputation, it's how they're going to move forward through life, and are they going to have an opportunity to advance, or are they going to be supported? Does the person who's interviewing and even the next level of management, first level of management, do they know what the symptoms are of the disability of the individual who they're interviewing? What we need to do as interviewers, we need to educate ourselves on some of these things, and also we need to be confident enough to ask. So when somebody does say, well, I'm going to need an accommodation, well, wonderful. What does that look like for you? And how does that help? And how can we support? So you're going to get the best answers from the person who you're interviewing by being supportive, by being compassionate, by being patient. Because this means so much to this individual that they've not only gotten ready to come to the interview, they've mentally prepared for it for days or weeks, and they've put their mask on to come. What we want to be able to do is allow people to bring their true self to work. So if we can start the process in the beginning, in the interview process, and again, like I said, being open, compassionate, and caring about, how can we support this individual and bringing their best self to work? And by doing that, again, like I said in the presentation, 30% increase in productivity just by starting the process in this way. Most organizations have a problem with onboarding. And I say most, I mean, this is across the board. This isn't just one industry. So And I'll say that from having opened 50 restaurants across Canada. Most organizations don't have a good onboarding setup. And take the opportunity to figure out the best way to onboard people and to support them. And if you don't have that resource within in-house, source it out. Outsource it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question here. So this is another anonymous question, but it has a comment. So I'll just speak to the question.
Nobody wants to be named today. I know who you are.
Well, the question says, how do you get someone to self-identify? This is a difficult conversation that must be protected by Canada's human rights or workplace law. How do we do this? And in response to this, Chantel Evers, I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. Thank you so much for commenting. She mentioned, I like to start the conversation with, do you have any support strategies that would help us to improve your experience working with us? Disclosure isn't mandatory. What employers need to know is how they can help.
I think it's a great answer. And my answer is a little shorter, but be the lighthouse, not the tugboat. You're not going to pull that out of somebody. It's just not going to happen. They're already anxious. They're already scared of whether or not they're going to get the job. The interview process is not even necessarily when you're going to get somebody's disclosure, and they don't have to give it to you at the interview process. I mean, if you bring somebody on, perhaps they're going to come on and see how the job goes for the first 3 months in the same way that an employer does the same thing. So I think we end up in a spot where we think, well, we got to get you started, and you've got to disclose right now. People are feeling it out, and again, people will not disclose unless safe space to do. And showing that people aren't afraid to talk about disability within the organization. So, and again, part of what I do in almost all conversations and presentations is I disclose right away so that it's a Me Too conversation. Because then if it's not a Me Too conversation, perhaps it's my son or my daughter or my grandchild or my brother or somebody who I work with. We have that conversation, and it becomes a little more fluent.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have another question here. It says, are there any public resources available for companies to look into statistics on retention rates and benefits to insurance? I think you were speaking to some of those before.
Yep, absolutely. The Insurance Bureau of Canada has got stats on that. StatsCan has stats on it, and it's not a hard find. You can look it up on Google. And like I say, it's the information is out there.
Awesome. Thank you. And another question here, how is it best to begin a pathway to building a culture towards disability awareness within my organization? And there's also another comment here from Chantel. The President's Group has a mentorship program for businesses.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if you want to add anything to that in terms of building a culture towards disability awareness within the organization and first steps towards that.
Absolutely. Having water cooler conversations about disability unto itself. When upper management is open about it, the next level becomes more open about it. The next level becomes more open about it. And we have to share our lived experience. We have to share what we know. We don't know everything. I don't know everything, right? But as Brad Simons, who I work with at CCRW, when I started with this organization, I didn't have a background in working with people with disability. I was a person with disability. And Brad said, you know what? You have so much lived experience. You have nothing to worry about. Just talk about your lived experience, and people want to talk to you about it. And I think that's the best way. And I think that if we have a culture where we don't allow bullying, we don't allow stigma, we don't allow conversations around that are ableist, it just becomes not acceptable, because there's so many things within work that aren't acceptable now, right? It quite literally needs to be removed. And it needs to be not accepted. It needs to be not accepted from your fellow workers, from the supervisor above you, from the supervisor above them. And again, it has to be across the board. So to create that culture, we all need to be talking about it, right? And maybe it's, I need a little bit of time, or, hey, can you help me out? Or can I have a conversation with you on the side? Or it's, hey, we're having somebody come in and talk about, supports for this particular industry. And there are lots of organizations that do that. And again, CCRW is one of them. I had a fantastic meeting this morning with Nova Scotia Public Works, and they brought all their apprentices into the room. And man, there's like 50 apprentices in there, I think. And what an opportunity to talk with them directly. And I mean, this is a government organization where it's not necessarily something they're talking about all the time when they're, when the mechanics are on a truck, fixing an engine, or the electricians are putting up lights along the highway or anything like that. But if you're bringing somebody in and saying, what, we want to have this conversation, want to bring people in to open up the dialogue, maybe that's what you got to do, is bring a third party in. If you don't know what to say, then bring somebody in to teach it. Again, the Nelson Mandela quote.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do have a few other questions here. And okay, so
answering the questions is way better, way easier than going through the PowerPoints. God,
that's behind us now, so it's all good. But yeah, so another question here. What is the hardest thing about speaking with someone who has a disability?
I think the hardest thing is understanding the difference between empathy and sympathy. Right? Are we talking about a medical model where we're talking about it job or get around in life, or are we having a conversation about
Sorry.
What are your strengths?
Sorry, Jason, it cut out there. I think you were talking about the options that are available, and then it cut out.
Ask the
I'm
question
sorry.
one more time.
Maybe just repeat the answer.
Reset my neurodivergent brain. It's already 80 miles down the
Sorry
road.
about that. Maybe let's just answer that question again. It just kind of cut out towards the beginning.
Oh, actually, my answer was knowing the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yeah, so, right after that. Yeah.
Okay, and the difference is you're not necessarily being told or asking questions about, how awful is this for you, or how does that feel? We need to be having conversations about, so what do you like to do? How have you gotten around this barrier? So, and that's an ongoing conversation, with folks with disabilities. I mean, even within the first program, for example, we're always having conversations about how can we get around or over or under or remove the barrier. All of those are opening the dialogue. It's not, how is the disability disabling you, right? And that's the difference, I think, between empathy and sympathy. So how can we work together to solve the challenge, or what's worked for you in the past, or what hasn't worked for you in the past, right? So let's tick these boxes off.
That's very well put. I think it also leads to your other point about being a lighthouse instead of a tugboat. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. So just another quick question that could be a segue here. Is there another word that we could use that is appropriate instead of disability? And there's a comment here from Emily on this. Thank you, Emily. And they're saying that there's nothing wrong with the word disability. So any thoughts on that, Jason, or any feedback that you would like to have on it?
I think Emily's right. And I also think that some people don't want to have a conversation about the word disability because really it's a difference. Right? I mean, as I said in Pete Bennett's quote, if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. I altered it a little bit because it's actually autism. But I mean, when we talk about autism, when we say, oh, so-and-so is on the spectrum, and we immediately think in our brains that that's a measurement system, so it's linear. By having a conversation about autism or neurodivergence being linear, we're really just improving the stigma. So, or not improving, but making it worse, because in society we're having conversation about how bad is it, or how severe is it, or how it, we almost want to have to put a number on the gauge, and that creates the problem unto itself. When in reality, the spectrum is a color spectrum. It's not linear. So it's a color spectrum. And I learned this from Pete. Thanks, Pete. It's a color spectrum in that some people are a little more dark purple and a little less yellow, or a little more green and a little less blue. And those strengths are just this and that. We're all different. We're all different in our own ways, and we all have challenges. We all don't necessarily have, the specific disability that is causing a barrier or a challenge, but we have to look at it as, from an intersectional and an individual lens, right? So are we talking to somebody whose social beliefs are that they want to have the sterilized conversation about disability, and this is the illness or the challenge, or are we having social conversations about how your disability could be your superpower? And I have this argument all the time about neurodivergence. My ADHD is my superpower, and I wasn't able to utilize it in the best way for about 50 years. But now I've figured out how to manage it, and it's been really the driving thing. So disability isn't a dirty word. It's just some people are uncomfortable with it.
Thank you for that, Jason.
Bye, Michelle. Hey, thanks for coming.
You beat me to it. And I just want to be aware of everybody's time. We are at the top of the hour here, just a minute in. We do have a few more questions, so we'll just be taking the time to answer those. And you will have that in the call's recording once we share that back out with you. So if you would like to stay with us here, that's amazing. But if you do need to go, we completely understand that. And all the details will be followed up on via email to the email address that we're using to sign up at registration. So thank you all for joining us. But I would just like to continue on with the Q&A here. Just wanted to quickly make a note here. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so, and we did have, actually, this was a prompt question. We had a question in from Tammy mentioning, could I please have a link for this recording? Sadly, I had a hard time finding my way into the event, and they're hungry for the info. So we will be sending a link to everybody, and it will also include all the details on the Foodability program alongside the survey and the workshop. So please stay tuned to that. And yeah, so continuing on. One question here just says, how do other staff react? Now, this is anonymous. I'm not sure if this was relating to a specific point of the conversation here. Unfortunately, couldn't see that. But yeah, maybe any input that we can add on to that for how other staff react on the topic?
Staff will not always love that somebody got a productivity support or accommodation, or they get to do something remote, or they have something else that somebody doesn't get, right? That's what's in it for me mindset, right? But we can reduce that more and more and more and more by making a common conversation within the culture, right? Every conversation we have, how can we make sure that the folks who are going to do this are not only safe, but how can we figure out how to make this position accessible? How can we talk about it within our culture? And how can we talk about if indeed you need a break, or if indeed you have something that you need a mental health day. Maybe you need just a physical break because you're going through something, an illness that you're not prepared to talk about yet, right? And we even talk about episodic disabilities. I mean, episodic depression comes from perhaps you've lost a loved one. I mean, I've said this a few times over the last year. I mean, I lost my father last Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. I was a wreck for 3 months, miserable, hateful.
Yeah.
But it's episodic, right? So we have to be open to understanding. So empathy goes a long way.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And yeah, I can relate to a lot about that piece in terms of like the certain venues that we have to kind of cover a lot of this, because we used to see it throughout university when the people with potentially dyslexia or in like getting stressed out in certain environments, they would have more time given to them, special rooms,
Yeah.
special papers. And frankly, before I understood what it was for, it was very much like, why is this happening? Why do they get more time? But it's just like you said, the moment you find out the awareness, you kind of gain the legitimacy of understanding, okay, this is actually helping someone perform the same job that I'm doing there.
Mhm.
And it's not a competition here. It's just making people feel more comfortable and having the same level of comfort really across the board for everybody working under a given organization. So that was definitely a huge experience for me. And thank you for that feedback. Um,
And I mean,
so
when we talk about university too, I mean, university has those things in place. So
yes,
they're not without requirements and barriers. So I mean, I was just in Newfoundland 2 weeks ago, and had a great conversation with College of North Atlantic, also with the Canadian Mental Health Association in the room, and we were talking about barriers and talking about working hard to remove the requirement for example, a psych ed assessment in order to get a requirement. When we talk about a psych ed assessment, I mean, $3,800 for a psych ed assessment. Not everybody's got $3,800 in their pocket.
yep.
And a lot of organizations who have funding, either provincially or federally, who are supporting folks with disabilities, they don't have it either. It's not within their budget. So when we talk about being able to accommodate and removing barriers, we can't be putting up barriers where you've got to prove it, right?
Yeah.
If I was missing a foot, I wouldn't have to prove it, right? So we have to talk about disability as a difference. And you shouldn't have to prove it. And even within the program, working with Red Seal Trades, oftentimes we hear, oh, well, what if somebody's trying to get away with something? I don't think we've had one single person that we would say they came to us, had a real conversation with accessibility consultants, and they were trying to get away with something,
Hmm.
right? Because it takes a lot of guts to come forward in the first place,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. And I think more to your point is that you don't have to prove that you have an awareness. People need to be aware of disabilities so that people don't have to prove it. The whole point is to understanding and being aware of it so that we can all accommodate and help each other. So,
The most shocking conversations I have with people is I tell them that 27% of Canadians have a disability. And people's eyes go, what?
yeah.
And I say, 1 in 4, do the math,
Yep.
right? There's 2 of us here, bring 2 more people in the room. It's still me,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
maybe
I'm
it's one
one
of
of
those
them
2
as
people,
well, right?
right?
And it's just one of those things that I think awareness is so important because when I never knew about this entire thing when I was in university.
Right.
I think, and I couldn't get a diagnosis, but I have a lot of tendencies for ADHD and ADD. And
Yeah.
when I was a child, my mother used to always tell me, "Oh, stop running around. You can't keep still. Something's wrong with you." And it's like, whoa,
Right.
right? You're in that kind of culture and environment that doesn't understand
And that's a
outside of
common
it.
misnomer too. I mean, ADHD isn't the same for everybody.
Exactly.
Again, we're talking about neurodivergence and we're talking about spectrums, right?
Yep.
So it's not the same for everybody. I mean, for me, I have to have communications in writing because my mind is already 80 miles down the road and I'm thinking about speaking in Vancouver next week, right? So even while we're having this conversation, my brain's doing all kinds of other things. I'm still here, but
Yeah.
it's doing all kinds of other things. But if I don't have a list of things that are required, that's my accommodation, right?
Yeah.
So everybody with a disability is different, and everybody is different. So in how they manage it and how they live with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Um, okay, so there is a question I'm hoping that maybe we can answer here. It says, I would love to know how best to write referral letters to prospective employers in the context of disability, because they're trying to coordinate a program that offers volunteers some pre-work skills
Mhm.
that they have designed to the program to be fully inclusive instead of accommodating.
How to write a referral letter?
Hmm.
I think, And I mean, I did this with the first program in doing outreach, because my position is to go across the country and talk with all of these different organizations. But the first conversation is, did you know? Right? Did you know that 1 in 4 Canadians, did you know that 1 billion people on the planet self-identify as having a disability? Did you know that the numbers in the slide, but that a significant portion of folks in Canada with disabilities have post-secondary education, right? People don't necessarily know because we're not having these conversations. Like I said, death and disability is the same stigma around having conversation, because perhaps people think it's impolite, or perhaps they feel like they don't want to say the wrong thing. So I would start off with, did you know? Because I mean, those are shocking facts. And when we talk about disabilities, learning differences falls under disabilities. 48% of Canadians cannot sit down, read the newspaper, and tell you what it said. And this is 48% of Canadians with a high school diploma.
Wow.
Did you know?
No, I did not.
Right? So when we're talking about learning differences and challenges, people don't know because we don't talk about it enough. Did you know that folks with ADHD have a much higher percentage of having trouble with math? Well, and I say this, and if you've heard this before, please smirk. I just found out about 6 months ago that ADHD and math are not friends. They never have been.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found out, it changed the color of my entire world. I had no idea. I've just thought I was terrible at math my whole life. And it literally changed the way that I function. Did you know?
That's very true. Yeah, I was never good in math either, but
I wasn't either, so maybe that's just a contributing factor.
For me, it confuses me. It's not that I don't understand the process. It's once I get into the process, it just kind of goes.
That's
right. It goes weird, or I don't, or it's all of a sudden it's like the language changed.
Yeah.
And I don't speak that language.
yeah. It's how certain concepts and frameworks fit, because I think it's the same thing. Like, language is very linear and easy for me to kind of put together. But the fact that 2 + 2 = 4 and 1 + 3 also equals 4, I remember in class like shortening out and getting upset at the teacher. I'm like, how? That's not adding up. So it's some things need to just be
here's a great
better.
example, and we talk about this in presentations a lot. Carrie had a client who is a carpenter's apprentice, and when she looks at numbers on the measuring tape, they go weird, and she can't track them. So, and this was such a detriment for this individual that she was going to actually back out of the trade. And I mean, to get in that far is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of commitment. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of family being involved. All of it. After a bit of conversation, Carrie suggested, "Have you tried a digital tape measure?" Didn't know it existed. $35 accommodation. Carrie got her a $35 tape measure. Changed this lady's world. Called her back, and Carrie tells the story all the time, and if she's listening, she's laughing. Called her back in tears a couple weeks later and said, and Carrie thought, "Oh no, this is going downhill." She couldn't thank her enough for giving her the confidence, and she didn't have to disclose to her employer, right? It's just, "Hey, I got this cool digital measuring tape," right? It's a productivity support. The more conversations we have, the more we learn, right?
Could be a simple solution that you don't even think about. I think sometimes we try and make it more difficult than it is. And I think we stop that, because that's our own judgment things there. And we just have to think of it in a simple manner.
Right.
Yep.
Good example.
Yep. Also, our ways to think and stuff, because even for my math, the teacher had to get physical blocks and show me that 1 + 3 = 4 and 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how the action of learning has to also be adapted into our limitations and abundances as humans. Like, we could be It's just like you said, we're variable in so many ways across that spectrum, in so many different nodes. It's not linear at all. And the only way that you can best encompass it and understand it is being open and also being aware and more aware and increasing everything that you can with information to be more aware of these sentiments.
And
So,
even when it comes to training, Marwan, I mean, when we're talking about how do you best train somebody? Well, you best train them in the best way that they learn, right?
yeah.
And I have conversations with colleges often about generational training. Somebody who went to school at the same time I did and went to university to be a teacher didn't go through the same way and in the same processes as my kids are going through in K to 12,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's a completely different language. So we need to be learning to teach in the way that people know how to learn. And the same thing culturally, in different cultures, there are cultures who it is completely against everything in their fiber to come forward and say, I don't understand. Or they will just wait for somebody to come back and say, you're doing it wrong, or why didn't you start? Because in their culture, the person who is mentoring or giving the task is the all-knowing, and they should have given you that information now anyway. So
Mhm.
we need to be teaching in the way that people learn. And the same thing with accessibility. We need to be functioning with people in the best way that they can bring their best self to work. And on that note, I'm almost out of time.
Yeah, that's perfect because I was just going to say that pretty much covers all of our questions. I still see we have 13 attendees in, so I want to thank everybody for sticking out with us too.
Thank
And
you.
again, Jason, thank you so much for your time here and for taking us through this wonderful kind of journey and explaining all these items. I might have gotten sidetracked across some of the questions too, but they also hit home, so thank you so much for that.
Yes, thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for everybody who attended today. This is a fabulously interesting topic. And when it was just presented to us as staff, when we were getting ready to kick the Foodability project off, it was amazing the list of things that fall under this disability realm. And so that has changed my whole way of looking at people and at things as well. So everybody take a look at our Foodability. We'll send you all the information, the links. Please participate as you can. And speaking of participation, our next webinar will be on Thursday, November 21st. And we are welcoming Dr. Celine Pinsett from DPM Research. Her organization was our evaluator on our skills training across Canada for supervisors project, and she will be presenting the results of that evaluation for that project. So many of you participated. You should come and listen. It was very interesting. The changes that were instituted, the skills that people learned, the knowledge, and just the sheer enjoyment that they got out of learning and creating more skills for themselves and for their supervisors in their organization. We've also now just kicked off our skills training across Canada for frontline workers. So if you still have not looked at that, please go and take a look at it. It is totally free. People are allowed to sign up your organization and your frontline workers, and they will get as much benefit out of it as our supervisors did. Thank you very much again. And Jason, it was great. We can have you back anytime.
It was absolutely my pleasure, and thank you for setting it all up and for your support as well, Marwan, for helping me get through the technical part.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
All right, take
Bye.
care and have a great rest of your day and week. Bye now.